Fibromyalgia is not in your head. Scientists took antibodies from fibromyalgia patients and then injected them into healthy mice. Guess what? All the mice developed pain hypersensitivity, aka fibromyalgia. So in other words, they've done real tests to show that fibromyalgia is not a psychosomatic illness. I personally had fibromyalgia long ago, so I have the reality of what it feels like. It's not fun. Fibromyalgia is not a pain disorder, okay? No, it's something completely different. So I'm going to go through the different stages that happen before you get fibromyalgia. But typically there are triggers or root causes. Okay, one trigger would be a latent virus. A latent virus is a virus that is no longer necessarily active all the time, but it can come out of remission, like Epstein-Barr virus, herpes simplex virus, and Lyme disease. Certain types of mold can also trigger this situation. And adjuvants. What's an adjuvant? An adjuvant is something they add to vaccines to make the vaccine hyperreactive. Aluminum also has been linked to more inflammation in the neurons going right into fibromyalgia and certain stress events. But there's also other things involved that can make the person vulnerable to developing fibromyalgia. There's certain genes that can set a person up for inflammatory conditions down the road. But that doesn't mean you can't reverse things, because genes can be affected by your epigenetics, which is your lifestyle. And I'm going to talk about how to overcome that. It's very common in people with fibromyalgia. They usually have low vitamin D. Now, why is that significant? Because vitamin D literally controls almost every part of your immune system, especially the NK cell, the natural killer cell in your immune system is dependent on vitamin D. And on top of that, these viruses that I mentioned shut down your vitamin D receptor to make you not be able to absorb vitamin D. And that could be the reason why the immune system is not working. If you really want to know what fibromyalgia is, it's an immune problem. Did you realize that vitamin D is one of the most powerful anti-inflammatory natural vitamins? And this is why exposure to the sun, especially in the summer, getting enough vitamin D is super important. Low magnesium is another thing to set you up for problems with fibromyalgia. I'm going to get into more why that is in a bit, but a lot of people are deficient in magnesium and they don't even know it. Low zinc is another thing to make you more susceptible. And also existing autoimmune diseases. There is a certain immune cell called a macrophage that eats up stuff. And one of the things that it'll eat is it'll eat up the aluminum, and then it crosses the blood-brain barrier and it brings it into the brain. But in addition to a low immune system, we have certain parts of our nerves, the tiny nerves, they're damaged and they're hypersensitive. And that is what you're feeling with fibromyalgia. Then what happens is we then have destruction in the mitochondria. That's the little energy factory of the cells. If you've ever taken biochemistry, inside the mitochondria, you have this assembly line factory that makes energy. And what you need to know, this inflammation that is created by this blocks the door to this energy. There's a backup energy system that your mitochondria use called glycolysis. It's an ancient system that our body can make energy, but not very efficiently. If you had the full capacity of your mitochondria, you would literally make 36 to 38 units of energy, or ATP. But with fibromyalgia, you're left with only making 2 ATP units of energy. It takes energy to repair. It takes energy to heal. The nervous system needs energy. Once someone develops fibromyalgia, a lot of times they're not able to get the deep delta wave sleep. With fibromyalgia, you have poor sleep. You also get a buildup of lactic acid, because that's one of the byproducts of this backup energy unit right here. Poor sleep, lactic acid, fatigue, no endurance, no repair. Other than that, you're perfectly fine. One last thing before I get into what to do about this. Part of this energy factory goes into this other part right here called coenzyme Q10, but that's only a very tiny piece of the puzzle. So let's get into what to do to reverse this right through here. So if you have fibromyalgia, what do you do? Well, the first thing we need to do is reestablish the fuel to the nerve cells. Okay, that would be the most important thing to do. And remember I told you that the body is dependent on this other plan B way of getting energy, which you're not getting a lot of energy from. But the alternative fuel to bypass this closed door to get in here is called ketones. Ketones bypass the damage and start feeding the neurons immediately. How do we get ketones in the body? The most powerful way is to do a fast. But there were 176 fibromyalgia cases in the study that went from a 3 to 12 day fast, and they showed significant lowering of pain and inflammation and fibromyalgia symptoms even 3 months after the fast. Fasting also increases something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, that basically helps you regrow your nervous system, okay? Super important. Fasting also is the most powerful thing to drop inflammation deep in the cells. So this right here is the most important therapeutic thing you could possibly do if you had fibromyalgia. Number 2, going on low carb. Why? Because you're going to generate ketones. That's another way to get energy into the neurons. Super important to start increasing your capacity to feed the neurons more energy. And I just want to point this out as a thing not to do. Do not do a lot of exercise. You want to be doing more resting. A lot of exercise is just going to push you right over the edge and make things worse, because you're going to add more stress to the cells. Because we don't have the capacity to repair, we don't have a large capacity of energy, and you're going to just run out of fuel and feel like crap. Number 4, focus on reducing stress by changing your environment in a way that makes things very, very low stress. Now, on a physical level, there's other things you can do to reduce stress, but also number 5, high doses of vitamin D3. And the amount of vitamin D I'm talking about is about 50,000 IUs. Now you're going to go, what? That's way too much. It's probably the perfect amount that you need for a period of time, some weeks, to raise your vitamin D levels up to between 60 to 80 nanograms per milliliter. If you start feeling good, then you know it's working, and that's the area you need to focus on. Anytime you take vitamin D, you need to also take additional cofactors to allow vitamin D to work and also to prevent calcium from building up. And that would be vitamin K2, magnesium, and zinc. So let's just go right into number 6, magnesium malate. Vitamin D can't work without magnesium. Magnesium is another super important cofactor in getting your energy factory to work. 3 out of 9 steps are dependent on magnesium. And the RDA for magnesium is a joke. You probably need 4 times the amount just to start to rehab the energy factory. So in fibromyalgia cases, there's a lot of tight muscles, there's a lot of spasms, and magnesium can help calm that down. Magnesium also helps your sleep. And there's even studies that show that taking malate in higher amounts can help with fibromyalgia cases. The amount of magnesium malate that I would recommend if you had fibromyalgia would be between 600 and 2,400 milligrams. Now, you wouldn't want to take that all in one dosage. You would want to spread it out over time. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to flood the body with enough magnesium to start getting you into a healing mode and start balancing things out with the energy and the sleep cycles and the repair. And on top of all that, we need magnesium to allow vitamin D to work, vitamin K2 to work, also B1 to work. Vitamin B1 cannot work without magnesium. Also B2, B6. So a lot of other nutrients are dependent on magnesium. And so many people are deficient, especially if they have fibromyalgia. There's also something that's a bit technical, but it's called NMDA. It's a receptor that if there's a problem with that, your pain is going to be amplified. Well, guess what? Magnesium blocks that, so it helps reduce pain. And like I said, the malate part gives you direct fuel right into the mitochondria. Number 7, coenzyme Q10 has been known to help people with fibromyalgia feel better. And then I want to mention number 8, vitamin B1. If you have a history of drinking alcohol or eating a lot of carbohydrates, vitamin B1 is going to be necessary to help clear out the lactic acid and help switch the fuel from this to this right here. And the last remedy, palmitoyl-ethanolamide. Try to say that 5 times. This has been researched to help calm neuroinflammation and help you sleep. You also don't want to forget about the gut microbiome. Super important in supporting fibromyalgia. So make sure you're consuming fermented foods, especially kefir and sauerkraut. If you feel that you've been exposed to aluminum from a lot of vaccines or some other sources, one of the best remedies is not a capsule or a supplement, but silica water. You have to consume this over a few months. It's a great way of detoxifying aluminum and actually finally healing. And getting enough sun exposure without becoming sunburnt is going to be really important, because you not only get vitamin D from the sun, but you get infrared, which is super healing for building up the cells, antioxidants, as well as increasing serotonin, which is huge. Now, since I mentioned number 1 being fasting, prolonged fasting, which is the most important, powerful, therapeutic thing you could possibly do, you're going to need to know the details of exactly how to do that. And I put this video up right here for you to watch right now, so